I want to talk about insulin resistance today and how it relates to your reproductive health. And this is super important, guys. I'm trying to get everything up and running over here because I don't think most of us understand how it all works. And if you did understand how it all links into insulin resistance, it might make a huge difference in your life, whether you're younger or older, but especially people who are in reproductive years, this could be really helpful to you. So I want you to understand a lot of things, and I'm going to take some time to go over it all today before I just dive in. All of this, so PCOS, erectile dysfunction, low testosterone, those three things for men, it's really low testosterone and erectile dysfunction kind of go hand in hand, right? So if you're an adult person who's suffering from those, I'm going to even talk about how it's affecting our youth. The lighting's really wonky in here today, but I want to explain how it's all linked to insulin resistance, what insulin resistance is, why it's important, and how this is all happening to us. Because if we don't understand that, then we start to, I know a lot of women who blame themselves because they can't get pregnant. There's something wrong with them. Men are the same way with their dysfunction. So if we can take all of that off the table, start to help you understand that it really does come back down to our food and our insulin, then maybe you have a path to get better and have a more normal, fulfilling life. So we're going to dive in. Just in case everybody doesn't know what insulin resistance is, I want to go over that. But then I'm going to go over what it looks like, some ways that you can tell it's you. I will also then dive into all of this fertility stuff, insulin resistance in pregnancy, that PCOS, and the erectile dysfunction stuff as well. I'm not a doctor. I am just a woman who got really sick and started studying all of these things to help other people out. So I suffered with PCOS when I was younger, and this is part of, I generally talk about the things that I suffered with that now I've gotten information. By the way, I study with doctors. I don't study with doctors. I study doctors like Dr. Bickman, Dr. Fung, Dr. Pardeep, Dr. Lee, Dr. Yao, for the information that I get. So this isn't like I've just gone on some weird website. I go to the doctors who are studying metabolic health, who are studying the things that I talk about, and then I try to bring it out so that everybody else can understand it. So that's where I'm at. I've never claimed to be a doctor or a nutritionist or anything like that. I worked in doctors' offices for years. In fact, I worked in a hormone clinic for years. And I was like the guinea pig in that clinic. We did all the tests on me that could be done. So we did blood work, we did saliva tests, we did 24-hour urine tests, so that we would have a baseline on one person how effective each of those tests were. So I have some background in it. Yeah. Not a doctor. No. Do you need to be a doctor to understand the things that are happening and understand that there's studies out there that are linked to all of this? No, you don't. So I'm just, again, just bringing this down to the people who don't want to geek out on it like I do and read through all this stuff and spend all day listening to doctors. I'm just here to bring it to the general population so everybody can get better. I hope that helps. So insulin resistance really is a dysfunction, a hormonal dysfunction. I want to be clear with that. I always talk about our food. You guys, I keep it cold in my house, so I'm trying to wrap a blanket around my legs. I grew up in North Idaho. You can't take the North Idaho out of the girl. Okay, so insulin resistance. When we're eating food that's basically defunct, it's causing the energy that our body creates from the food we eat to be converted too quickly. Why that happens is because, Sue, I didn't see the second message you sent because it showed up in a different chat. Um, so what's happening is our food has less than half the fiber in it that it used to have. And when there's not as much fiber, it impedes how our food is digested, how it goes through the digestive tract, how it moves through the gut, how much it keeps you satiated, how quickly the sugars are converted into the body. how it impacts a number of things in the body. So it's not just that our food has been modified, it's that it's being stripped of these enzymes and fibers that are helping us to digest our food. That's really one of the biggest cores of the issue right now. So when we look at the fact that our food is imperfect, and we all know that our food is imperfect today. Everybody knows it, whether you want to stand up and admit it or not, we all know. And I'm not just talking about our boxed foods or the fast foods we run through. Um, all of our food has been changed and just reacts differently in our body than it used to. So when all of that happens, what's happening is our body is converting things to energy too quickly, and it's not keeping you full as long. It's delivering too much energy into the bloodstream, which is producing a need for this insulin. That's a hormone, right? The pancreas produces insulin, which is a hormone. The easier way to think of it is the food you eat gets broken down, refined into like gasoline. That's your fuel. Yeah, no, I worked in medical offices for years. I just have a mind that likes to. I'm going to stop for a second. If you've ever heard of Clifton Strengths, one of my top strengths is learner. I like to learn. I like to know stuff. I can't make sense of things unless I know stuff. So that's just my personality. So I was actually going to study to become a doctor later in life, but then I realized it was going to take up too much of my life and I had other things to do. So here we are. All right, so this insulin, when we're eating food, it's converting into fuel or being refined, right? So it's just like taking raw oil, crude oil, and turning it into gasoline. That's what our body is doing with our fuel. But now, so you have this refined stuff here that's energy, fuel for the body. It has to get carried throughout the body. So now we think of tanker trucks, right? That carry this fuel around and distribute it to all of these gas stations around the nation, the world. And those tanker trucks are your insulin. Your insulin is an energy transport system. It does a lot of things, but for right now, we're going to think of it as an energy transport. So what happens if you're producing so much fuel, it has to be carried somewhere to be stored, right? Or used. So now we're creating, instead of just having a couple of tanker trucks to take the fuel out, we're overproducing this fuel. So we're requiring more and more and more of this energy transport system. And that's where we start to get to be having too much insulin. So we're going to go in stages. We need insulin. By the way, insulin is an amazing hormone when it's in normal levels. But when we require too much of it, it starts to have problems. So when there's too many of these trucks on the road, the cells in our body Sue, I hear you. Sherry Sue, I hear you. But but I'm still going to share information with people. So you can do you. I'm going to continue to share information with people. All right. So look, when the body has too much of the insulin in your body, right? So this energy transport, it's overwhelming all the cells. And I want you to understand that every single cell in your body has insulin receptors on it. It's because every cell needs to be able to take up energy, right? That makes sense. Does that make sense to everybody? That every cell needs energy to function? Every cell needs energy to function. So that means every cell is susceptible to insulin, the energy transporter, because the energy has to get to that cell somehow. But when we have too much insulin carrying too much energy around, the cells start to get resistant to it. So another analogy I like to use is like the nosy neighbor. You have a neighbor that's helpful, you move in someplace and the neighbor's coming over and bringing you things and giving you information, and it's great. You open the door for them once in a while because it's great to have what they bring. But then all of a sudden they're knocking on your door all the time. They're wanting to be in your house all the time. They're just nosing around your business, and you stop opening your door for that nosy neighbor. That's what our cells feel like with insulin. Insulin in high amounts has now become a nosy neighbor that the cells don't want to respond to. Now, some cells like the drama. So they're going to take up too much of it. And we end up with things like skin tags. We end up with things like our endothelium, the inner wall of our blood vessels, being too thick because they're taking up too much of this energy. And there's a number of other actions throughout the body. But most of the body is becoming resistant. Like, I don't want to deal with you. I'm not going to talk to you. Well, that's okay, except for that now that they're so resistant to it, they're not even taking up the energy that they need to be functioning properly. That affects us. I'm sure everybody can understand how that affects us globally throughout our health. So insulin resistance is too much energy being converted too quickly in the system, creating a need for this hormone insulin. We have too much insulin in the system. The long-term too much insulin becomes insulin resistance. Now, Houston, we have a problem, okay? So that starts to affect things like brain health, gut health, joint health, a number of things throughout the body. So you have liver issues, you have kidney issues, you have heart issues, you have digestive tract issues, you have thyroid issues, you have what we're going to talk about today, reproductive issues. Okay, so this isn't just about I got fat and some things happened to me that I need to lose weight. All these things wouldn't be here if I wasn't heavy. Well, there's some truth to that, but how about we find out why you got heavy in the first place? I'm one of those, right? So what's happening is with the too much insulin, too much energy, when the cells become resistant and they're like, I just can't take you anymore. I'm not going to have you. Then those tanker trucks of the hormone insulin are still out there carrying this fuel, and you're continuing to put more fuel in. So the trucks are like, I got to empty this because I've got to go get more of this fuel to deliver it because they're continuing to produce fuel. So where does it put it? Does anybody know where our energy storehouses in our body is? Why there's such an epidemic of obesity in the world right now? Where it goes next when the rest of the cells are resistant is your fat cells. Those are your energy storehouses. Now you have two types of fat cells. You have subcutaneous fat. Your liver is one of the places. And okay, and thank you for that. So there's two types of energy that get stored primarily in the liver. And do you know what those two are? Why we're starting to see this, what they call non-alcoholic fatty liver, when it used to only be alcoholic fatty liver? Tell me that if you know it, and that's fine if you don't, because I'll tell you anyway. But so your body is storing this fat. So you have the subcutaneous fat, which is the fat that's underneath the skin, that's like jiggly and nobody likes it. It's, hanging off your arms, your thighs, your butt. And then we have a little simpler than that, but that question does not apply to this topic. So that's not I'm not going to divert into that. That's a great topic for someplace else. So look, when we have this fat being accumulated, it's interesting to note that in the presence of insulin resistance, too much insulin in the body, it affects the brain, and the brain starts to tell you to store more visceral fat. Now, visceral fat is the fat that's underneath the abdominal wall and in and around your organs. It's there to help protect them, to keep them warm, to keep them functioning properly. But when this dysfunction happens, now you're storing way too much of it. So your liver gets impacted, your kidneys get impacted, your pancreas is overworked, your gallbladder's not filtering properly or storing properly, your heart is being impacted, your intestines and the gut health are being impacted. You guys, but visceral fat, I always thought that basically visceral fat was below the neck. And then the last month I was listening to a doctor talk about it, and he was saying visceral fat actually goes up into your throat, which makes sense, and builds in your tongue. So I don't know how many people have ever even heard this. Yep. So and it's wanting to. So great, Bengal. So the visceral fat is being put into your. The visceral fat is there to keep you warm, right? Because the visceral fat has warming properties. It has mitochondria in it, so it's able to warm up where the subcutaneous fat is white because it doesn't have that mitochondria in it. Those are more just storehouses, and the brown fat or the visceral fat is really actually has a function, right? Um, so when you have fat tongue, by the way, that contributes to sleep apnea. So when you're sleeping, your tongue is actually falling back and occluding your throat and your ability to breathe at night. And so you're constantly waking up because your tongue has gotten so big that it's blocking off your airway. That's one action of sleep apnea, just one. It happened to me. I was really offended when a doctor told me I had a fat tongue. They were going to do a surgery to reduce the fat in my tongue. Well, my tongue is a normal size now. Crazy to think that your tongue gets fat, but makes sense, right? So anyway, all of this visceral fat gets built, and what happens then is your belly starts to grow. When your belly is growing, whether you're fat anywhere else or not, you are you should understand that this is probably a dysfunction of insulin resistance. Now, there are some things that could happen that make your belly grow, so be careful with that, right? But if you're having a number of symptoms and your belly's growing, it's not that I'm saying don't go see the doctor. I'm just saying why not start to address the insulin resistance. If it's a food-borne disorder that you can address with food, then no, they didn't reduce my tongue. They wanted to, and they do. So, Bengal, what they do is um, they cut a slit in your tongue. They explained it to me, and I opted out, and then we got my health back. So, thank goodness, right? But they actually cut a small slit in your tongue, and then they inject chemical in there to dissolve the fat, and then they put a stitch in to close the tongue back up, and it reduces the tongue bed size, so it helps with the sleep apnea. Crazy. Things you don't know that you didn't know you needed to know. All right, so one indication that you might be insulin resistant is um, that big bulging belly, right? So whether you're obese or not, if your belly is starting to pooch out and it's this big belly, and it's not just like just when you have the food baby because you ate a lot, but it's just constantly out there, that's a sign of insulin resistance. Um, some of the top signs that Dr. Bickman talks about are high blood pressure. Mine was like 180 over 150 or 180 over 110. It would go up to 150 on the diastolic and sometimes a little higher than that. Scary as heck. But I had long-term hypertension since my 20s. I was having hypertension and nobody could figure it out. Went to numbers of doctors. We were on dual therapy for years and years and years and years and years and couldn't get it under control. And that was even before I got diagnosed as diabetic, which wasn't until my 50s, right? So back in my 20s, we had this big flashing red light that I was insulin resistant that no physician caught. As a result, there's a number of things that happened. I lost 3 joints, both hips, 1 knee. I lost my gallbladder, among other things that happened as a result of long-term insulin resistance. So address it early. If your belly's growing, whether you're obese or not, that's insulin resistance. Now, hypertension is 95% of hypertension cases are insulin resistance. And so if your blood pressure is 130 over 80 or higher, you need to understand that you're likely insulin resistant. Okay. I'll talk about some answers later on, but right now I want you to understand that just addressing the insulin resistance can help your blood pressure. It did for me. Mine is now normally in the morning 112 over 74, and I'm not on any medications for anything, nothing. I've gotten off 10 prescription medications and I have my health back. Okay, so boy, am I getting distracted today. So hypertension is one, right? The other two that show up in your skin, but there's a number of things that show up in your skin. I want you to understand that your skin is like an early warning signal for your body. So if your skin is having issues, like you're having skin tags, those are not just grandpa problems. Those are insulin resistance problems. That's why we're seeing more and more skin tags on younger and younger people. It used to be, you'd see skin tags and, oh, they're a grandma. That's just what happens. No. And I have no skin tags now. So how 2 years ago, did I have a bunch of skin tags and not now? Because I got more insulin sensitive and the skin tags just went away. Skin tags are one. The dark skin patches on your elbows, knees, around your neck, in your groin, around where your bra rides, maybe your waistband. I've seen it on ankles where people's ankles are turning into cankles and it rubs on the shoes. Those are insulin resistance. Now look, my elbow used to be really rough and patchy and dark all the way down to like here, and it was embarrassing. And I would scrub it, I would put lotions on it, I would do all of these things. My knees were the same way. And I couldn't figure out what was wrong. No doctor told me, hey, you're insulin resistant. Fix the insulin resistance and that will go away. I don't use crazy lotions or anything. Smooth as a baby's butt. It's all gone. So hypertension, skin tags, acanthosis nigricans are those dark skin patches. And then we're going to talk about these in depth in just a little bit. So PCOS and erectile dysfunction or metabolic infertility. Yes, it is metabolic infertility. It's not all the crazy things that everybody wants to talk about. There are some instances where those could happen, but the biggest instance that's causing PCOS and erectile dysfunction, low T, is actually insulin resistance. So hang out for a minute. I'm going to get there in just a few minutes. A couple of other symptoms that you might be insulin resistance would be things like if you're having high triglycerides and low HDL. Those are insulin resistance. And if you guys are interested in the calculation that you can do with your blood work currently to give you an indication if you're insulin resistant or not, just type a yes in the chat and I'll come back and give you that calculation. But high triglycerides, low HDL tell you that you're insulin resistant. Then if you think about things like migraine headaches, constant headaches, that can be a sign of insulin resistance. If you're constantly hungry for sugary foods, for salty foods, if you just feel like you ate and you're just stuffed and your belly's huge, but a half an hour later you're hungry, like inexplicably hungry again, that's likely insulin resistance. If you're having body aches and pains, some people would call it fibromyalgia. Now there's some nerve damage that can be causing fibromyalgia, but a vast majority of fibromyalgia, one doctor told me, funny, I worked with, doctors, by the way, even if you go to 2 different doctors, you may get 2 different answers. So it's up to you to do the best that you can and figure out what this is. Manette, I'll give you that calculation in just a second. But in this one doctor's office I worked in, one doctor said, sorry for my language, fibromyalgia is a bullshit disorder, that it's just a diagnosis that doctors give when they don't know what else to call it, okay? Others were like, no, it's real. We need to diagnose it. We need to take care of it. So how does that happen? Well, what I think she was alluding to and didn't understand, and hopefully she does now, is that this fibromyalgia is real. People have this pain throughout their body. I did. And it's not a bullshit diagnosis. It's a result of your body being insulin resistant for most people. So that body-wide ache and pain, joint deterioration, those can all be signs of insulin resistance. So I hope that helps with some of it. Now, there is a test you guys can do to tell if you want to have your doctor do it. I think it's about $300. Some insurances cover it, some don't. It used to be that only endocrinologists would run it. More and more general practitioners are running it. It's called a HOMA, HOMAIR, or just simply a fasting insulin test. That can give you an indicator of whether you're insulin resistant or not. Now, some metabolic scientists and doctors are saying that it's a good indicator, but they haven't perfected it yet because they're getting tests that say that a person is not doesn't have too much insulin, and yet all their symptoms would say that they're insulin resistant. So it's a start, right? It's a start. But what I want to tell you is if you have the symptoms, regardless of these tests, address your diet. That's the simplest thing, right? Keep addressing your diet, keep working with your doctor, understand that our food is imperfect and that we need to start addressing that root cause. Who knows? Maybe it will get better for you. Maybe you need the medications, but why not address the easiest thing, which is to address your food. So this calculation number, this is the second way The second way that has to do with labs that you can tell if you're insulin resistant. So if you have a piece of paper and pen ready, let me know. I'm going to give you the calculation. So remember I said your triglycerides and I said your HDL. So you're going to go to your lab work, you're going to find your lipid panel or your fats panel, and you're going to find that number by triglycerides and you're going to find the number by HDL. Then you want to divide the triglycerides, which should be a much bigger number, by the HDL number. Triglycerides divided by HDL, okay? The result you get should be 1.5 or lower. And what that's going to tell you is not only your risk for insulin resistance, but it's going to give you a calculation of your risk for cardiovascular disease. So is there any wonder why I talk about blood pressure and cardiovascular disease? They're intricately linked, you guys. So 1.5 or lower, and you should be good. Okay, but again, I want you to listen to your body and the symptoms in your body. If it's just addressing nutritional deficiencies, what's that harm? What good can come from it? A lot. So 1.5 or less, you should be okay. Now, the NIH says 2.0 or less, but I think they're probably going to be changing that number. They've changed a number of other numbers. But where they can agree is between 2 and 3, it's like, yeah, you have a problem, you might want to start addressing it. If your number is 3 or higher, the resultant number of that calculation is 3 or higher, you are insulin resistant and you need to get it under control, okay? So if you guys have those labs, I'll do a video on that later. I'm trying to get back to my normal routine of videos, you guys. So I'd love to know what your numbers look like. And if you're over 3, reach out to me. I will give you some simple, the protocol that I use and some simple solutions to help get it back under control. So, but the other ways that you can tell are just by those symptoms. So high blood pressure, bulging belly, skin tags, skin discoloration, PCOS, erectile dysfunction, migraines, cravings, those lipid panels being off, and body-wide aches and pains. Now, insulin resistance links into a whole lot of different issues. I'm not going to go over them all in one call, but I do want to kind of go over, and I do have some notes because no, I'm not a doctor, but I want to go over, because you guys, I also get talking and forget where I'm at. But I want to go over how insulin resistance is linked to metabolic disorders really quickly so that this can help everybody understand. So insulin resistance and metabolic disorders are closely linked. Number one, metabolic syndrome. One of the key components of metabolic syndrome is insulin resistance. So when we look at that, I want you to understand that 93% of us have a metabolic disorder right now, 93%. So that means only 7% of us are metabolically healthy, and that can lead into a number of issues. So if your blood pressure is 130/80 or higher, you're insulin resistant and headed to metabolic disorders. Okay, so, but the other thing you need to understand is this whole metabolic thing, insulin resistance, is very, very closely linked to your reproductive health. So now we're going to dive into how that looks for PCOS, for erectile dysfunction, but also for pregnancy and the ability to carry, and produce healthy children. Okay, so that's important to a lot of people. You guys, when we look at a couple of things, why is it that the incidence in a generation, the incidence of PCOS, of erectile dysfunction, of overweight and sick babies is happening more now in one generation? Did we really evolve generationally in just that one generation, or is something else going on? I would invite you to understand that something else is going on. What has changed so drastically in this generation? And I'm talking since like I've been born. What's changed so drastically is not just our lifestyle and the stress. That's a big causator too, but our food. I'm going to keep bringing it back to our food. Our food has been stripped of nutrients and especially fibers. Less than 50% of the fibers that they used to have are in them now, and that's impacting our health. So what happens with both men and women who have high insulin levels or metabolic disorders have higher instances of reproductive issues. So the more insulin resistant you are, and this is by scientific studies, the more likely you are to have reproductive issues. Do they go hand in hand? Probably, probably. So if you are having reproductive issues, and I wish I would have known this when I was in my 20s, had because I was at the doctor like twice a month, every month, trying to figure out why I wasn't able to conceive, why I wasn't able to have children. I eventually was able to have children, but it was long, arduous, and it caused a lot of stress in my marriage and in my family, that I wasn't able to have children. And so I know that there are other people who suffer from that, who are feeling like you want to have a family, but you just can't conceive for some reason. So instead of fertility shots and all of these things, if you thought that maybe you could just address the root cause of your food intake and what's happening with your insulin, and that could help you, would it be worth it to you? I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying throw the baby out with the bathwater. It really, like, don't get rid of all the other stuff you're doing, but why not take a look at the simplest issue, and that is just that our food is making us sick. So with pregnancy, that you look, let's slow down. Insulin is anabolic. It wants the body to grow, right? It wants to grow things. It's delivering energy. So when you're pregnant, ladies, what's happening is you actually are creating more insulin receptors because the body wants to grow. It needs to store energy for the baby. It's got to grow this placenta. It's got to grow this baby. It's got to do all of these wonderful things that happen during pregnancy. So your insulin receptors are actually increased. And you can become insulin resistant, and it's actually pretty typical for women to become insulin resistant during pregnancy, okay, because they're having high amounts of this hormone created. It's also interesting to note that a woman who never has been pregnant and a woman who have been pregnant look very different as they age, right? So a woman who has had at least one pregnancy is 50% more likely to be obese as she ages because she's developed this insulin resistance in pregnancy. Now she's more likely to be obese. She's more likely to have type 2 diabetes as she gets older, a number of things that happen. That's just our bodies with, we're growing a baby, and it's part of what happens. So as women get older and they're no longer in their 20s and 30s, is it bad for them to have a little bit extra weight? No. But is it bad for the obesity that we see now? Yes. Is it important to understand why it's happening? Most likely, I would think it is. So when you have this excess insulin in pregnancy, that's creating the insulin resistance later in life. But if you have a high amount of insulin resistance, the higher that insulin resistance is in pregnancy, the more likely these other things are to happen to you later. Even if you return to a normal weight pre-pregnancy and you're just cruising along and like, I lost all my baby weight, I'm good, it can creep up on you years later. So understanding insulin resistance, how it develops, and what's happening in your body, I think is really important. What happens in pregnancy is your insulin level keeps growing, right? And you're hungry because you're trying to grow a baby. So you're putting more and more energy and you're developing more and more insulin. But eventually, there's just not enough insulin to carry all of that energy around. And Bengal, I forgot to answer about the liver. Remind me of that in a little bit. Um, so when that happens, you end up with gestational diabetes, right? So now it's gone from insulin resistant, from the body simply having a lot of insulin, and some of your cells becoming resistant, like you get dark skin patches and fatigue and all of these other things during pregnancy. But now it tips the scale into gestational diabetes. So when that happens, it puts you at even higher risk for type 2 diabetes and obesity later. Now, there's some ethnicities that are more likely for this to happen too, and those are Asians, Hispanics, and Middle Eastern ethnicities, right? But regardless of your ethnicity, your pre-pregnancy weight, your pre-pregnancy health, that developing gestational diabetes puts you at greater risk on the other side. So, especially during pregnancy, I'm not saying restrict your eating, but I'm saying, maybe not so much of the donuts and cakes. And like, pregnancy is not the time to just be like, oh, I can eat whatever I want because I'm growing this baby. You got to have the fuel, but maybe pay attention to what's going into your body so that you can have a healthier baby and a healthier you on the other side. So, let me check my notes because I do lose track of all the things I want to talk about. Okay, we talked about that. Preeclampsia. Preeclampsia. This one is interesting. So we tend to think of it as um, placenta or uterine disorder. And really what it is a kidney disorder. Hey, Coach Dale, good morning. So when we have insulin resistance during pregnancy, a couple of things are happening when you get to preeclampsia. The higher level of insulin resistance you are in the first half of your pregnancy, the higher that insulin resistance gets to, the more likely you are to have preeclampsia in the last trimester of pregnancy. So what's happening with preeclampsia is that there's a correlation between the blood pressure and your fight or flight response, which is all regulated by insulin. I've done video after video on those. I'll be doing more because it's so important. So insulin resistance definitely affects your blood pressure and your vascularity. This is going to be important to men in just a little bit, but it affects all of that. So during pregnancy, your placenta is putting out this protein signal called VEGF, and that is signaling the body to create extra blood vessels so that things can grow, so that there's more delivery of energy to this area where you're growing a baby. So this VEGF is being produced, and that's a great thing, right? The placenta is doing that. Now, in the presence of insulin resistance, it causes a disruption in this whole thing within the placenta, but it's causing a receptor to be produced as well called VEGF receptor that actually sticks to that hormone, that protein, and it stops it from acting. Hey, Melba. And so now you have a reduced amount of blood flow from in and around the uterus and from the placenta to the baby. So the baby is starting to be at risk. It's not growing like it should. The mom is starting to have problems, and it can be painful. So now you're having this, not only are you not growing the blood vessels, but with insulin resistance, it's messing with how you have this fight or flight response. So whether you're producing nitric oxide or not, so now your blood vessels aren't dilating enough and they're too thick from the endothelium being thickened. So now you have this real reduction of blood vessel size and blood delivery, and you're not getting enough blood vessels being made for the baby. Can you see where that's dangerous for mom and baby? You start to have swelling, you start retaining more water, and more water means more blood pressure. Now the mom's at real risk. There's a reason why there's this immediate swelling, blood pressure. Moms have to be put on bed rest, and the baby's starting to be at risk. And what happens with preeclampsia, which is actually being resultant from insulin resistance and all of these factors that it's causing, disrupting this normal process. So then what happens is, as they have to get the placenta out of the mom as soon as possible, but you can't remove the placenta until you remove the baby. So a lot of moms with preeclampsia are having cesarean births, trying to get the baby out of the mom's body at a time that it's healthiest for the baby and the mom. So as soon as the baby can come out with preeclampsia, they're trying to get the baby out. That happened with my first pregnancy. Nobody explained any of this. Of course, they don't. I mean, most people don't care. They're just like, take care of me. I don't care. This is what's going on. That's actually absolutely what happened with my first pregnancy. Now, being Native American, it can cause miscarriage. Extreme insulin resistance in pregnancy can cause miscarriage through this preeclampsia. Yes. And it's painful, you guys. So my daughter was born cesarean. I was able to have a VBAC back then. They didn't think such a big thing of it. I had gotten my health under control a little bit better, so when I was had my son, I was able to have a vaginal birth with him. But the preeclampsia in my daughter, I had to do sitz baths. I was bedridden. They did the whole amniocentesis, which is painful. I joke that my feet print are still on the bed down there in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, because it was painful for them to shove that big old needle in to test the amniotic fluid. Anyway, all of this actually comes from insulin resistance. Back then, they didn't know about it, or they didn't train about it, and they didn't understand it. And now we do know. And there's my daughter now. So she is my preeclampsia uh, cesarean section baby who was born of a woman who was very, very insulin resistant and had gestational diabetes. So what's interesting to understand before I close out with all this part. So if you want to avoid preeclampsia, if you want to avoid those complications in pregnancy and have the healthiest baby you can, you need to address your insulin resistance along the way. So it's interesting to note that it's not just the mom. If the mom has insulin resistance before the baby, if the mom has excess weight before the baby, she's more likely to be insulin resistant during pregnancy. She's more likely to have complications during pregnancy. She's also more likely to have a baby who's going to develop insulin resistance early, or a baby who's born with insulin resistance. But it's not all on the mom. A man who has insulin resistance, who is participating in that conception of the baby, actually, they are now showing that men who procreate with insulin resistance are also contributing to this risk of insulin resistance babies as much as the mom. So it takes two, you guys. It takes two to tango. If the mom is responsible, then so is the dad. Okay? This can actually happen from either side. Of course, the dad has a moment in time, and the mom has 9 months of building a baby that she has to be careful for. Okay. So I think that's really important. Now, the other thing with insulin resistance in reproduction and in babies is this: women who are highly insulin resistant, you're passing that insulin resistance on to the child. So two things can happen, and this is important in what a normal body weight is for a baby. Now, outside of genetics and ethnicity, so within the realm of your genetics and ethnicity, if your baby is either obese or underweight, it's going to affect them later in life for insulin resistance. If they're already obese for your genetics at birth, they're more likely to become pre-diabetic, diabetic as a youth. They're more likely to have weight problems as they grow, and they're more likely to develop this whole thing of insulin resistance and diabetes later in life. Interestingly enough, a baby who's severely underweight when they're born, and they think likely due to the stress of being so underweight, and cortisol, if you've listened to anything else I've done, cortisol contributes to insulin resistance. So they don't really understand why an underweight baby is more likely to develop insulin resistance later in life, but they understand that it happens. They think that cortisol and the stress of being underweight in a baby who's not thriving well is contributing to. Thank you. Thank you. They're not my studies. I read a lot. I listen to a lot of doctors. I take a lot of notes. I had to write a lot of notes this morning. That's why I was late, because I was like, I don't want to miss this stuff. And I know I get off on tangents. So I just really wanted to make sure that I addressed all of these things so that you guys can understand, because this week is all about reproductive health, what's happening. So since my daughter is in the room, I want to talk about this too. So she suffers with insulin resistance. She's on the same protocol as me and has had a number of issues because I was so highly insulin resistant. I was had gestational diabetes. She was born cesarean section. She was underweight. She was under a lot of stress as a baby. She was not big until she got older and started having children herself, and then she started to gain weight and now struggles with it. So all of the things I just talked about, for me in my life, when I look at it, I'm like, oh my, I did this to my daughter. because I didn't understand and I was insulin resistant as well. Mostly mature. I am not a registered dietitian. I've told you that before. So I'm taking studies from doctors and translating it for, or just bringing it to people. I wouldn't even say translating to people so they can understand better what is going on or maybe going on with their health. And I talk about addressing your diet. We don't get enough fiber in our bodies right now in our food, and it's causing us problems. So most of our disorders today, and scientists and doctors will say that almost all of our disorders today are born of our metabolism, which is born of our food and nutrition deficiencies. So I think that anybody who is self-aware and lives in their own body can understand those things. I don't think you have to be a doctor to understand when your body hurts or when your body's not acting like it should and when food is affecting your body. So I think that we're all smart enough to understand those things, right? I think we all are. So this all this information, you guys, by the way, I'm bringing to you this morning really came from this book from Dr. Benjamin Bikman, who is one of the top metabolic scientists in the world. He talks about a lot of different things. I bring you the portions that are relatable because I've lived through them. But we're going to get into men's health and erectile dysfunction. Now we've talked about how it's or no, we're not. We're going to deal with PCOS first. We're going to deal with PCOS because we've talked about pregnancy, gestational diabetes, how it affects the mom, how it affects the baby, and a number of those things. By the way, a little side note, there are studies coming out now that are stating that they're starting to see evidence that high levels of insulin resistance is linked to creating autism or exacerbating autism. There also are some studies coming out that saying a woman who is highly insulin resistant is more likely to have an autistic baby. So I will be interested to see where those studies go and whether that's proven out or not. But that's kind of where things are leaning right now. And that's really interesting to hear and understand that not only are we affecting the baby's weight and their propensity towards diabetes and a number of other issues that can affect whether the baby has these neuropsychiatric disorders as well. Crafty, you wanted to know which enzymes I take so I can do more. Sure. So the enzymes I take, we'll go over that in a little bit. If you go to my profile on TikTok or on any of these pages, it will bring up my landing page. And at the towards the bottom are my recommendations. The enzymes and the bile that I take are in there. Okay. I use a company that's pretty parallel to the company that has the protocol that I do. We just don't do the enzymes and the bile. So I found a company that I feel is similar to this company. Those are what I use. I don't get paid for sharing that. I just share that to help anybody who doesn't have a gallbladder. So Crafty, go check that out. But I'll show you guys where all that's at in just a little bit. All right, so PCOS. I know that I've caught a lot of flack from people about PCOS. So number one, it affects 10 million women worldwide. PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome. It's insulin resistant is actually very intricately linked to PCOS, and we're going to go over that right now, why it is and what's happening with PCOS and why I'm relaying to you from Dr. Bikman that PCOS, in his words, and I was able to meet Dr. Bikman and have some time with him and ask him some questions one-on-one. And one of the things that he said, not a question I asked, but one of the things that he said in this talk that he gave to us was that now that he's done more study on it, right? Now that he understands the intricacies of reproductive health and insulin resistance, that he would consider, especially PCOS, to be metabolic infertility. So if you remove the metabolic disorder, the likelihood that that woman is going to be infertile, I'm trying to say infertility and infertile at the same time, and it just came out all crazy. So the likelihood of increasing your fertility is greater the more you can get your insulin under control. Okay. So he's just out and out said he calls PCOS, erectile dysfunction, metabolic infertility, and we're about to go over why that is right now. Okay, so PCOS, there's a lot of things that are happening. When we think about ovulation, I want you to understand what's happening in your body. A woman's body is creating these eggs in preparation for ovulation. Now, it doesn't just produce one egg, it produces a number of eggs. As they grow, at the beginning of your cycle, your estrogen levels are low. And as those eggs are starting to grow, you're producing more and more estrogen. And one egg, like there's the one sperm, one egg thing, but one egg grows to the point where the body's like, okay, this is the one. This is the one that's strong enough for us to reproduce with. This is the one we're going to put through. And it sends a signal to your brain, and a number of things are going to happen. So, your body, where did I lost my notes, because this gets really, your body starts to produce more and more estrogen. Now, when this happens, what it cues the one egg to be pushed through and into the fallopian tubes, right? The rest of the eggs just kind of get forgotten. They're no longer important. They don't matter. They weren't the strongest of the bunch. So they just stop being fed. They stop being taken care of. They die off. They disappear from the ovaries. So that batch of eggs is now gone. And the one egg is there for reproduction. This is what's happening during that cycle of ovulation. So you have low estrogen levels, and they start to increase as that egg is growing. The egg gets released, and then you're waiting for the sperm to come in. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But so if any of this gets disrupted, then you're having problems with ovulation. And that's what's happening in PCOS. Your body, let's go back. So we have estrogens and we have androgens. Okay, so it's kind of like male female or female male. Estrogens, think more female. Androgens, think more male. What most people don't understand is that our estrogens are produced from our androgens. Okay, so testosterone converts into estrogen in the body. This is important for both men and women, and men I'm going to get to you in a little bit, but I want to deal with this PCOS thing with women. So with the presence of insulin, too much insulin in the body, it impedes how the ovaries can produce and take the testosterone and produce estrogen. So when the body's not producing enough estrogen and it has too much testosterone because insulin has affected the ovaries and it's not allowing this conversion of testosterone into estrogen, now we're having problems with ovulation. The body's like, wait, I know we're producing eggs, but none of them are growing because the estrogen isn't out enough. There's too much testosterone in the body. Nothing ever gets pushed out. All those cues of there's one good egg, the rest of them we're going to ignore and we're going to die off. That never happens. Those eggs are sitting there and they never get pushed back out of the ovaries, and they just kind of sink back in and get absorbed into the ovaries, causing ovarian cysts. Some of them may end up in the tubes, causing polycystic ovarian and sometimes in the tubes disorder, and it's painful. And this is where this is coming from with PCOS. So insulin has disrupted that cycle of turning androgens into estrogens, and the levels are off throughout the cycle. The one egg never gets produced, and so when the one egg never gets produced, and then the one egg that does get produced, when it doesn't get fertilized, then we have a period because the body's discarding that. So now periods are off. Periods are painful. Moods are off. And with the excess testosterone in the body, women are having excess hair and coarser hair on their face. But they're also having male pattern baldness, and they're having more of the dark skin patches. But it all started with insulin, too much insulin, born from the fact that our food is imperfect, too much insulin impacting this whole dance between estrogen and testosterone in women, and now women are suffering and have PCOS. Are there genetic things that can make you more disposed to that? Absolutely. but does it really start with this dysfunction between insulin and your hormones? Yes, it does. So you can have the propensity for anything, but it takes that lever to kick it over the board and make it really happen. So without the presence of insulin resistance, is it less likely that you would develop PCOS? Absolutely, it is. Absolutely. So if you're suffering with PCOS, understand that insulin is messing with the way your body converts hormones and the way your body ovulates, and that's causing those irregular periods, the difficulty for you to even conceive, all of this mood stuff. And remember, insulin is a fat storing hormone. So now you're heavy, and so you're carrying excess fat, and that can be a problem for your baby later on. So if you want to have a healthy pregnancy, you need to start addressing your insulin, get your weight under control a little bit, and then start procreating and having babies. Because look, if we want to be parents, we want to be healthy parents. I wish I would have had this information when I was younger. I wish I would have known, because I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, I didn't take any, like, I didn't allow them to give me any drugs when I was having my baby, because I wanted my daughter to be as healthy as she could be. But I didn't have all this information. Could I have given her a better life by understanding? Yes. Yes. So it's not all about us all the time. It's about taking care of the families that we do want to have, right? So if you're a woman with PCOS, a number of women, by the way, have seen this reverse and turn around in their lives as far as their weight, their ovulation, and their ability to conceive within 60 to 90 days of doing the protocol that I do. And they're having healthy children, and they're having healthy pregnancies. So it really does come down to address the insulin, address all the dysfunction that it causes, and have a healthier life from that. So now we're going to get to men. Okay, you guys, I know that was a lot of time talking about the ladies, and we're going to talk about erectile dysfunction and your reproductive health, low testosterone. Yeah, it is an amazing turnaround. But that's what, oh, that's one thing I did miss. So women who have PCOS and they're struggling with fertility are often going to all these fertility doctors, taking fertility drugs, doing whatever they can to have a baby. Like 30 something years ago, when I conceived my daughter, I was at the doctor's office. I mean, and I was in tears. I wanted a baby. I wanted to have a family. I wanted to love and take care of a child so bad. And I would see these women having babies that weren't taking care of them, some really horrible stories. And I would like wail and cry at God, like, why can't I have a baby? I would take care of it. So I was at the doctor all the time. We were doing all kinds of tests and studies, and we didn't have the money for me to do all the fertility stuff. But now what I'm getting to is that if you're insulin resistant, those drugs are less likely to work for you than if you're not. So if you just have some genetic issue going on and you're having fertility problems and you go do those fertility drugs, you're likely to have more success with conceiving. But if you add insulin resistance into that mix and your infertility is coming from insulin resistance, those drugs, science and studies are showing those drugs are not as likely to work for you. So really, if it's that simple, if so many women have been turning it around in 60 to 90 days by doing a protocol that's real food products, why wouldn't you do that instead of suffering with all the other things? Now, if you want to continue to work with a fertility specialist, do it. Do it. I'm not telling you not to, but I'm just saying let's be real and address the root cause. So back to men. I said we were going to talk about men. So a couple of the issues are erectile dysfunction and sperm production, right? So I don't talk about men as much. So let's look at that. Low testosterone. Remember when I said testosterone gets converted into estrogen? Okay. And remember that I also said insulin is it's an energy transport. What I really haven't said this live is that insulin is a fat storing hormone. If it can't offload that energy that you've eaten as food and that your body's created out of the energy your body's created out of the food you eat, if it can't deliver that to the other cells of your body, it's going to deliver it to your fat cells. Now, men have testes and not ovaries, right? So men are not converting testosterone into estrogen like women do, because that's what ovaries do, is convert that testosterone in us and create estrogens out of it. But what men do have are fat cells when they're insulin resistant. It's interesting to note that fat cells start to act like secondary ovaries. So in men who have excess weight born of insulin resistance, now it's taking their testosterone and converting it into estrogen. Now the men end up with man boobs, love handles, excess weight, and all the other things that come along with too much estrogen in men and low testosterone. And they can actually be tested with low testosterone. And studies are showing that men with low testosterone are also the the most the most I always say this wrong, but anyway, men who are highest in insulin resistance tend to have the lowest testosterone, because the fat cells are converting the testosterone into estrogen is one of the reasons. That comes directly from Dr. Bickman, by the way. That's not me making stuff up. So your fat cells in men are acting as ovaries. So is there a reason why men who are lean are more virile and have more of the male tendencies? No, that's just genetics, right? That's just the way our bodies work. They're not converting testosterone into estrogen. The more weight you put on, and the weight is not coming from low testosterone, the weight is coming from high insulin. The high insulin is causing the low testosterone. So just like we've had women who have been able to reverse their PCOS or positively impact their PCOS within 60 to 90 days, we have numbers of stories of men who are feeling the same. So now, as they get their insulin under control, their testosterone levels are bouncing back because we've removed that excess testosterone. They're starting to lean out and have less body fat. Their man boobs are going away. Their testosterone level, they're no longer needing hormone replacement therapy. What? Because they addressed their diet? What? Yeah, you guys, it's real. And there are numbers of men that have happened to. So now the other part, there's a part where the testes, right? And I can't remember because again, I don't deal with the men. So let me look at my notes. Um, oh yes. So the insulin, that's what I knew it had to do with the testes. So the insulin resistance in a man, just like it produces this problem with converting testosterone to estrogen in women, in the testes of men, it messes with the men's ability to produce testosterone. So now you have a reduced production of testosterone from the testes, and the testosterone that you do produce is being consumed by the fat cells and converted into estrogen. So double whammy for you, right? And then the less testosterone that your testes are producing, the less sperm that you're producing, the less likely that you are to be able to impregnate or have that reproductive fertility going on. So again, address the insulin resistance, the sperm count goes up, the testosterone goes up, and then here's the other part, erectile dysfunction. So not only is all of that happening, but now we talk about vascularity and getting blood flow to areas, right? With insulin resistance, it's not, the blood flow is not just affecting our heart. And I've gone over like 5 or 6 different ways that insulin resistance affects our blood flow. So it makes our blood vessel walls too thick, narrowing them down, impeding blood flow. It does not kick off your fight or flight response so that your vessels can't dilate. It's reducing the amount of nitric oxide that you can produce. Your blood vessels don't dilate. It takes a toll on your kidneys and they start to retain water, so you have blood pressure. But now what happens is when you have less blood flow because of a number of these reasons to that vital area, you have problems getting erections. So if you are having that problem, understand that you're not defunct as a man, that there's not something wrong with you, that it's just the food environment that we've been given that's causing this problem. If we look at as a generation, the fact that this is more prevalent in us now as it was a generation ago, there's got to be an indicator as to why. And the big flashing red light, red flag is our food and insulin resistance. So we started changing our food and eating more sugar when Ansel Keys said fat was so bad for us, and we started consuming high amounts of refined sugar, as in carbohydrates, because we were told to reduce the fat. Well, when we reduce fat as an industry, food industry, when they reduce the fat content in food, it takes the flavor away. So what are they going to add to put flavor back in? Sugar. Sugar is making things flavorful. So they've stripped all of these essential nutrients out and they put sugar in to make it more tasty so that you'll eat more, so that you are liking the food that you're eating. Because nobody wants to eat something that doesn't taste good. And we've gotten addicted to having food that tastes really good. And so we're buying into this problem, and then we're causing our own problem eating these foods that are low in fiber, high in sugar, low in fat, and now we're insulin resistant, and we're facing a number of these problems, like these reproductive problems that I just talked about. I hope that today made some sense about reproductive issues and why this may be happening, and why infertility, why PCOS, why erectile dysfunction, why low testosterone is happening. And if it doesn't, just message me and let's have the conversation. But I hope that it helps you guys understand a little bit about what may be going on and why this is so important, why getting insulin under control is so important to your reproductive health. Now, I keep talking about food. So we're getting less than 50% of the fiber that we should get in our food. The protocol that I've talked about, you guys, let's go with this. Intermittent fasting is great, but if you're a pregnant woman and you're having a baby, trying to build a baby, that's not the time to restrict calories. That's not the time for traditional get your weight under control, get your insulin under control. Now, intermittent fasting can be healthy for all of us. In pregnancy, I would consult with your doctor before you ever did that during pregnancy. But for the rest of us, intermittent fasting can actually be a godsend. What we need to do is allow our insulin. Remember, that's the one thing that I've been talking about this whole live. We need to allow our insulin to get under control so that all of these reproductive things can start to be normal. And there's so many other things, brain health, heart health, gut health, that I talk about. But we've got to get that under control. So the protocol that I use goes hand in hand with intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting allows us to get the insulin levels down so that our gut can have a rest, our insulin isn't overwhelming our cells, and we can have a more normal response to insulin. But most of us are so food addicted and so in this cycle that it's really hard to do intermittent fasting or to even get what we need to when we do eat. It still is converting too quickly and causing these insulin spikes. So the protocol I use that helps with all of that is a tea that I drink in the morning. It's actually my tea right here. I needed a drink. Okay, so a tea in the morning. It gives me energy. It gives me mental clarity. It doesn't give me jitters. It doesn't have me crash in an hour. It shuts down my hunger. I had my last meal at 5 yesterday. I had it a little late. So it's 10 now. So I'm at 17 and a half hours of fasting. I'm not hungry. I will eat shortly after this live is done. But that tea helps shut down my hunger, helps me burn fat for fuel, helps with some other things, like when you're in that state, it does not break a fast. It helps with ketones being produced. And when you're in this state, HGH, human growth hormone, is being produced. And I can go over all of those in another live, another time. This week I'm talking about reproductive health. But tea in the morning does all these amazing things. Shuts down hunger, helps you burn fat for fuel, gives you mental clarity and energy. I keep talking about fiber. Now what I will do before I eat is I'll drink a packet of pre-meal drink before I eat, about 10 minutes before I eat. This packet has 7 different soluble and insoluble fibers in it, a number of vitamins and minerals, and plant phytosterols in it that are helping with heart health. They're helping with reducing the blood glucose and helping level out the insulin because it's reducing blood glucose spikes. It's also helping with the conversion of fats into our system. So one packet of this can reduce a blood glucose spike by 27%. That's huge. So it in effect takes a high glycemic food and turns it into a medium glycemic food. That just means that it's not converting into energy and delivering into the system too quick. It's converting into energy at a more steady state. So the insulin level never has to go as high and get out of control and cause all of these problems. It's keeping your insulin level lower and steadier, not causing that resistance and that cells saying, I don't want to hear from you anymore. And what you need to understand is the higher the insulin level goes, the longer it takes for that to drop. So we want to keep that insulin level low and steady. Now, I do have 6 simple tips that I go over in correlation with this, and I'm going to show you where you can get the free ebook for that. But if you're interested in the protocol that's helped women get their periods back to normal, not be suffering with PCOS, being able to have children now when they thought they couldn't, men getting their testosterone level back and their erectile dysfunction reversed and actually having the life they thought they would have with their wives and their partners, I'm going to show you where you can get it. So if you guys go to my profile here on TikTok, there we go. So over on Facebook and YouTube, you guys are going to look in a different place. On TikTok, you're going to come tap on my picture at the top. That's going to take you to my profile. Right below the red lights, you're going to see a link. You're going to click on that link. On Facebook, it's right here on my page, Vibrant Living with Misha. If you scroll down, it's going to show you where to get the link. If you're on YouTube, the link is right there on the top of my page. So anywhere you go, you're going to get to this page. The top link is where you're going to order. There is a full website that goes over both of the products. It has the nutritional panels, all of that. If you're somebody who needs to look and get more information, great. Please go there. I've scoured the web for all the information I can from the company and whatnot and compiled it in one place for you guys. That free ebook with the 6 simple steps, and I'll go over those in a second, you can get it right here. It's free for you guys. It lists the fats that I recommend. It has some great sources of protein. It tells you why all of this stuff that I recommend is going on here, the 6 simple steps. If you need to just reach out to me, you can contact me here on WhatsApp. Crafty, if you're still here. The enzymes, because you guys, we didn't talk about it today because it's not today, but I don't have a gallbladder. So I do add some bile salts into my day, and I do add some digestive enzymes into my day to help with that specific problem. Crafty, that's where you're going to find it. Let's take a look at that real quick. So when you go to my recommendations page, the links to the tools that make my life, you're just going to scroll down. My voice is getting, the ketone tester I use daily is here. The fitness watch that I use daily is here. Here's the some MCT oils. You guys, those are super healthy for you. So MCT oils that I add to my day for my my health is there. But when you come down here, here's the ox bile. NutriCost is a great company who believes in purity and high quality products. So I use a lot of their stuff. You'll see that with the MCT oils as well. These are the digestive enzymes that I add when I eat. So there's that, Crafty. Now back to how to find the protocol that I'm on. So if you just click the top link here, remember it's a tea in the morning, a pre-meal drink before you eat anything. You're going to do some intermittent fasting. I coach you through all of that. By the way, you guys, when you purchase from me, you're getting me as your coach. I get to help you out. You're just going to go to this link. It's going to take you, I'm going to show you real quick. You're going to have a choice between flavors. So you're going to get 30 tea, 60 balance. Now, you get a choice between lemon and lemon ginger for your flavors. Then for the drink, and the drink, they're both drinks, for the tea that you have in the morning. Now, for the pre-meal drink, you're going to get a choice right now between lime and orange. I love the orange, and I still have some of the old packets. Our newer packets, I keep waiting for my package. It should be here any day. Our newer packets are taller and skinnier, so they fit better in a water bottle. but this you get in lime or orange. So you just make your choice. The lemon is not got lemon in it. It's just the natural flavor of the tea plant that we use for that product. Does not taste like tea, tastes more like a light lemonade. The lemon ginger has ginger extract in it, so it's going to have a little ginger heat. If you're not a ginger fan, stick with the lemon. I would just do the lemon and the lime flavor right now because the lime is a limited edition, so you want to get it while it's there and not regret that you didn't later. But you're going to get 30 of the tea, 60 of the pre-meal drink. So you're going to do some intermittent fasting. I've gone 17 and a half hours without even thinking about it. So, and I've been drinking my tea in the morning. Now I'll have my pre-meal drink before my first meal. And then around 4 o'clock after my afternoon live, I will have my second meal, and that's it. And then I'm not hungry the rest of the day. This not only helps slow down those fats and sugars from being delivered, it helps you feel full before you eat, and it helps you feel full longer after you eat. Now, I've had some questions where people said, well, does it matter when I drink the orange packet? Yes, it does. So the whole purpose of the orange packet is to help you feel full so you're not overeating, and it's coating your stomach, helping with those acids in your stomach. It's coating the food you eat, slowing down how quickly it delivers. So yes, you're going to feel fuller before you eat. You're going to feel fuller longer after you eat. So you're not having that breakthrough hunger. It's going to keep your blood sugars lower so that you're not having that post-meal crash of I'm cold, I'm tired, I have no energy, I just want to go lay down. That all starts to go away pretty rapidly. A lot of people will ask me how long to see results. It's really dependent on you, how long you've been sick, and what the rest of your life looks like. And I coach you through all of that. Melba, 68, lost your gallbladder. Um, I I just talked about that not long ago. I can let's see, maybe I'll just go ahead and talk about the gallbladder towards the end of this week because it is so important, and there are so many women who lose their gallbladders. I will say this right now, what I know with the gallbladder and losing your gallbladder are a couple of things. I know Crafty was confused because she like, well, do I have my mom on the system or not without the gallbladder? They're two different things. They're very interconnected and yet different things. Number one, the reason that we're losing our gallbladder is directly linked to insulin resistance. It changes how that bile converts in your gallbladder. So it starts to create a sludge in there. That sludge starts to harden and create stones. And those stones are what are dangerous and gets blocked in your duct, your bile duct. So for me, what happened is I had a number of stones, did not even know that I had them, and my bile duct got blocked. I thought it was food poisoning, waited way too long. I was so septic by the time I actually went to the hospital. They said I was within 2 hours of death. When they looked at my gallbladder, it wasn't like, oh, I had a few stones. My gallbladder was chock full of stones. So I always say, I wish I wouldn't have let them take it, but then I have to remember that it was pretty defunct. So I don't know. Was it worth, the risk of having to go back to the doctor and having this continual thing happen? Now, you can dissolve those stones and get rid of them in your system. There's a number of things you can do. I'm not telling you that the Feel Great system will do that. I'm just telling you, if you're put in that position, please do. Hi, Sarah. Please do the research and be self-aware enough to make the best choice for you before you have to have your gallbladder removed, okay? For those of you who've had it removed, I've had it removed. Both of my daughters have had it removed. By the way, your liver is at risk. I don't know if he's still in here. We were talking about liver problems earlier. If you've lost your gallbladder or you're having gallbladder problems, your liver is already unhealthy. The gallbladder is attached to the liver. It's like a filtration system for the liver. If your gallbladder is overworked and unhealthy, it means your liver is unhealthy. It means your liver probably has too much visceral fat, too much fat storage, too much going on, and it's struggling. So we need to get the liver healthy. If you still have your gallbladder, you need to pay attention to your liver health, and getting insulin under control is key to that. Getting the visceral fat that's getting stored in your liver is key to that. and then you can have better gallbladder health. Now, when your gallbladder is removed, so I want to keep my insulin under control, right? So the enzymes and the bile are not doing that. They're helping me digest my food so I don't end up with the gastritis pain. You guys, sometimes if I'm not careful after I eat, it actually looks like I'm pregnant. That's not insulin resistance. That's, hey, Bob, that's actually gastritis, where my gut gets so inflamed because of no gallbladder that it gets hard. And I will feel like I'm 8, 9 months pregnant. A few hours later, it goes away. You have to be careful about how much you eat. You have to be careful about unhealthy. Now, without a gallbladder, you have to be even more careful about your exposure to those unhealthy fats like seed oils and vegetable oils. If you pay attention to your body, it's not just that I'm saying it, you guys pay attention to how your body feels when things happen. It's going to tell you everything you need to know. If you're having sugars and all of a sudden you're having to run to the bathroom, it's telling you that those sugars are not good for you. Your body's dumping it, right? Without a gallbladder, those sugars go right through you. Without a gallbladder, those fats are causing more problems in your liver and your digestive tract, and now you end up with gastritis. So if you want to avoid the gastritis, you've got to switch to more raw organic foods. It doesn't mean you can't eat meats. Meats are actually really good sources of protein, but make sure that your carbohydrate intake is not refined carbohydrate intake. When you do fry foods, look, without a gallbladder, it's not that you can't have foods that have fat. It's the fat that are in the foods that you eat that matters. So if it's seed oils, sunflower oil, safflower oil, canola oil, corn oil, all of those things are going to hurt when you eat them with no gallbladder. It's going to cause you to run to the restroom. It's going to cause you to be up all night in pain and have acid reflux and all of that. So why do it? I regularly use butter. Extra virgin olive oil are the two main oils in my house. I have coconut oil for a number of holistic reasons. Avocado oil is really great. I eat avocado a lot. I don't have those issues when I use those oils. It's only when I've gone out to eat and somebody's used those other oils, or I get a hold of other, like fried chicken. I love fried chicken, but that stuff hurts, right? So your gallbladder, it's going to change all of that. Now, what I was going to say is too, when I talked about um, this intricate interplay of hormones in your body, you're already insulin resistant if you're insulin resistant if your gallbladder's at risk. But once you've had your gallbladder out, now it starts causing problems, ladies, especially with your thyroid. So now you're having even more problems with weight. Melba, did you notice that you started a time after you had your gallbladder out that you started actually having weight gain? There's a reason why young women who have had babies, now we just talked about how in pregnancy, if you're insulin resistant, that you're more likely to have diabetes type 2 and obesity post-pregnancy, like whether it's right away or later. Now, when you're severely insulin resistant, it's causing problems with the gallbladder. That flares up during pregnancy as well. So it is kind of a piece of this. And then you have your gallbladder removed. Now, post-pregnancy, you're already at risk for obesity and insulin resistance. Your gallbladder is removed. It's messing with your thyroid receptors. So even if you have normal amounts of thyroid in your system, your receptors aren't functioning properly as a result of not having the proper amounts of bile in a gallbladder. And so those all combined are making you more likely to be obese. So what I'm doing with my health, and Crafty and I were talking about earlier, is I do a number of things. I do some red light therapy to help my liver. I do some castor oil to help my liver. But I will never, ever, ever stop the protocol that I do, because I know that this is helping me with all of that on the broader spectrum. Now, am I addressing some smaller things to help, like the bile, which I've doubled up on my bile now? I will have that before I eat. I do the digestive enzymes when I eat, and I'm not having the gastritis. Last spring, like it took about 1.5 years for me to understand that, like I was like, what has changed? Like, I have put on a little bit extra weight since I lost my initial 55, right? And I'm like, "Wait a minute, what's happening? I'm eating better, I'm doing more. Why is this happening?" And it took a lot of research and me just being self-aware, going, "When did this start happening? What was happening?" And bingo, it was the gallbladder being removed. So I started doing some studies on what happens when you have your gallbladder removed. I have not dove as deeply into that as I'd like because I'm so focused on insulin resistance and getting this under control. But I am starting to look at the result of having the gallbladder removed. Obesity is a problem with the gallbladder being removed. It just is. So you've got to get in those bile salts. Your body, look, your liver is creating them without a gallbladder, but it has no place to store them. So when you eat, now you don't have that excess bile that's helping with the food breakdown that you would have if you had a gallbladder. That's why I do the bile salts and the bile and the digestive enzymes, because what's happening without a gallbladder is you're overtaxing your liver. Now, your liver doesn't have this repository for the bile to sit and wait for us to eat. It's not there. So when we do eat, there's even more load on the liver when you don't have a gallbladder. That's why I use digestive enzymes and bile salts. I hope that does that explain a lot of it, Melba? It's not perfect, but I hope that explains. I got my gallbladder removed in 2020, was it 2021? So I had the timeline. I had my left knee replaced in March of 2021. Right after that, I started the system. My right knee was supposed to be replaced the following year. Don't have to have that replaced because it's actually regenerated since I've become more insulin sensitive. I lost 55 pounds. I was doing really great. And and then I got sick. I actually had a hernia surgery first. Still did well, flew through that well. They said I had less visceral fat inside of me than anyone that they'd really seen at my age and size. So the system was working, right? And the system still is working. It had stripped down the visceral fat inside my body. They were shocked. I still have a lot of subcutaneous fat. That's going to take longer to get rid of because of vascularity issues. Some areas just don't have that warmth now. But and I'm 59. So I've been carrying this around for a while. You guys also, the longer you've been carrying your weight, the longer it's going to take you to get it off. Be aware of that. Be aware of that. So the bile salts and enzymes, Melba, if you go to my profile and just click on that link down towards the bottom, there's a my recommendations page. It will show you the bile salts and the enzymes I use. And that's where you can find them there. And it's on an Amazon shop, but you can go get them. I don't sell for them. It's just, I'm just helping you guys out with what I use. Yeah, so Crafty, um, part of getting blood flow to her body is getting her insulin under control. You guys, when you're insulin resistant, your blood flow starts to atrophy. Your blood vessels start to get smaller. They have less blood flow through them, but your blood pressure is building up. So your heart rate and your blood pressure is going higher for a number of reasons. But your blood vessels start to atrophy and you're not getting blood flow to a number of parts of your body. So getting the insulin under control, allowing that blood flow function, reducing the size of the endothelium, allowing for better nitric oxide production, allowing for that fight or flight response to happen more normally in your body. Like, look, we have a fight or flight response every morning. Do you guys know that? Every morning we have something called the dawn effect, where our body actually starts to produce a lot of cortisol. That puts us in a fight or flight mode, like, oh, it's time to wake up. I got to get going. I got things to do. That's fight or flight that's waking you up in the morning, and it increases your heart rate, it increases your blood sugars, it increases a number of things. So it depends on how that acts in your body, whether your morning blood sugars are going to stay high even on the system or not. So I would like you to wait for a few hours to have your blood sugar reading after the fight or flight response is normalized out, and then you'll have a better picture of it. But that all can happen. But if she has half the blood in her body, that's a whole other thing, and I would really need to look at if there's any link to that, to insulin resistance. I have to believe there is because I've found so many other links, But let me check before I open on that. I know that there's less blood flow going to areas, but you said half the blood. Um, so what I really need to do is find out if insulin resistance reduces production of blood. That's a good one for me to look up. Okay, so my gallbladder, back to the baby girl. So September of 2021, I had the hernia surgery. Then I thought that I had food poisoning. It must have been like the end of October of 2021. And I drove myself to the hospital. I'm a stubborn ass woman. And they said, yeah, that's when they told me 2 hours from death is where I was at. I was pretty damn sick. I was in a lot of pain. So they removed the stones, put a stent in about a month later. So the beginning of December, when I had the gallbladder removed in 2021. Now, almost a year later is when I started noticing problems. It was really this February, March that I started noticing severe gastritis. I'm like, why does this hurt? What's happening? Why do I have this bloating? Why do I have all of that going on? That pain, it's intense, you guys. The pain from gastritis is intense. And I thought, I eat better. I'm doing the system. Why is this happening? And that's when I had to realize that it was the removal of the gallbladder. The system, what I want to say, the protocol that I use, if you get your insulin resistance under control, can help you from ever having to go through having the gallbladder removed by allowing your liver and your gallbladder to function more properly. That's my belief. This isn't made as a prevent your gallbladder from being removed, but if we follow the steps, link the dots and say that insulin resistance directly causes these gallbladder issues, and that if you don't have the insulin resistance, you're less likely to have those gallstones and gallbladder problems. I think there's a pretty good link for why I would say just do the system and do it early. This is not just a sales pitch. This is you guys' reality as it sinks into me. I'm 59. I've had a number of things happen. I would hope that somebody, a handful of people, hopefully hundreds of people, can learn from the mistakes I made and the information I didn't get, and actually not have to go through all the stuff that I went through, really. Okay. So just do the system early. Make sure you're taking care of your health, because I was one of those people who thought, it's not going to happen to me. I'm healthy. I kept having my blood work done. My A1C, my blood glucose, and my triglycerides were all in normal range. Yet I had all of these symptoms. Not one physician, not one dietitian, not one person addressed any of those symptoms with me at all. Okay. They couldn't figure out where they were coming from until I got diagnosed as diabetic. And then it was really me doing research and me going, why is all of this happening? Why are these? And it was really as I started to feel better that I started questioning, okay, why did I start something for my diabetes and hopefully to lose weight that now has, you guys ready? Now, like, I understand that I lost my gallbladder. I understand now that 3 joints, a knee and 2 hips, may not have had to be replaced because my joint tissue is being eaten up by the inflammation and the insulin resistance. Okay. Both hips and 1 knee have been replaced. The right knee that was supposed to be replaced has regenerated, doesn't hurt, doesn't pop, doesn't click, functions normal. I can go up and down stairs with it. The only joints in my body that hurt are the ones that were replaced. Well, I can't, I mean, they're metal. They're artificial. It's going to be an issue. Does it function better than it was before they were replaced? Yes. By the way, both of my hips were cracking because I waited so long that I had to have them replaced. So start taking care of the nutrition early. Understand that when you're insulin resistant, when your cells aren't taking up energy, that means your bones are not being as dense. That means the ligament and the labrums and the meniscus and all of that connective tissue is at risk as well, because they still need energy to grow. So is there a reason I lost 3 joints while I was so insulin resistant? In my mind, yes, there is. Melba, when they said my gallbladder had to go, they said my enzymes were all over the place. I don't know that now, Melba. That's a great question. she's asking, so her question is, you guys, when they said her gallbladder had to go, her enzymes were all over the place. I know. And then she said, how do I know if my enzymes are right now? I don't know that answer, to be honest. I know that when I started adding in the bile salts and the enzymes, and yes, I do the castor oil pack on my liver several times a week to help, pull more toxins and stuff out of my liver. I know that I don't have those nights of that severe gastritis that would keep me up all night long. When you have that severe gastritis that's keeping you up all night long, what next happens? Your cortisol levels go up, and then your insulin levels go up even more. It's this whole cycle of things. So I pay attention to how my body feels. I just know that I'm putting the enzymes in as I eat, that I'm not having those bloating and that severe pain and that acid reflux and all of those things that were happening. I don't have this random pain under my rib cage that felt like somebody was sticking knives in me under there. I don't have any of that anymore at all since I added the salts and the enzymes to my day. But that's only because my gallbladder is out. So if you have your gallbladder out and this is working for you, great. But if you're having more issues, then yeah, I would say add bile salts, add enzymes. And I don't have science behind it, you guys. There's points in time where honestly, I get to the point where I'm like, ugh, I've tried all the stuff. As much as I like to learn, you guys, my brain can only hold so much. I'm 59. There's only so much more I want to know and learn in this world. And so I'm just like, I read a lot about castor oil and how well it works for the gallbladder and the liver. And so I'm like, it's not hurting me. I'm going to give it a shot. And I feel like it's been helping. So I do gallbladder and a little DMSO, or not gallbladder, castor oil and DMSO on my liver. And I have a grandson who has liposomal disorder, where his liver is already fatty, not because of the food he eats, but because of genetic disorder. And so that, bless that little boy's heart, I have castor oil out at my house, and he will come grab the bottle and have me put it on him when he's here, because he's very aware. 7-year-old man. 7-year-old man. I know a lot of adults who should be as adult as that boy is. Okay. The bile salts are not really salts. It's bile, the same thing so the bile salts are really what your liver is producing and storing in the gallbladder when you have a gallbladder, that helps break down your foods and digest them. So it's a different thing than the salt with blood pressure. Now, when we talk about salt with blood pressure, that boy, you guys, if you don't, I'll put up a video later of him. He is my heart and soul. I mean, I am a very, very lucky woman, because I had 2 men in my life, actually 3, that I just absolutely adore, and I feel very, very, very special. My dad, my son, and my grandson. They're like, I can't even explain. My dad was he was the reason that I persevered. So amazing, amazing man. Now, bile salts with blood pressure. So when we talk about salts with blood pressure, what we're really talking about is your body's ability to offload salts. And the reason we want it to offload salts is because we don't want the overproduction of water or fluid volume in our blood, right? So different types of salts. But those salts that your kidneys cannot offload those salts, and your kidneys will filter those salts out, pass them out in your urine. But in the presence of insulin resistance, the kidneys cannot do that filtration job. Same thing where we were talking about preeclampsia, and the kidneys being unable to filter is a great root cause of the preeclampsia that women are experiencing in pregnancy. It's similar with the blood pressure in your heart. So you're not able to offload the salts, you're retaining more water, and in the presence of all of these other factors that are going on with insulin resistance, you're having excess blood pressure. So, Melba, my blood pressure used to be 180 over 100, yeah, it was 180 over 150 at some point during every day. Okay, every single day. There were several days a week it got even higher than that, and the best blood pressure we could get was 100 and on dual therapy that I'm no longer on. My blood pressure now runs 112 over 74 every single morning. Even when I've had a day where I'm like really I have a fiery personality. So I was cussing at my printer last night. I said some pretty choice words to it. It took a while for me to get there, but look, even with those moments when you would think, fight or flight, ready to fight, and your blood pressure should be up. I think the highest my blood pressure has been when I tested it during those moments was like 125 over 76, which is fine. I mean, all of the actions, I can feel all the actions in my body working. It just isn't spiking my blood pressure. And how I did that was still just the protocol, because getting my insulin resistance under control, getting those sugar spikes and the insulin spikes under control. So I'm not having the insulin resistance that's causing the high blood pressure. Now my blood pressure is normal every day. So now I have whatever. I never count my salt. I never like, oh, I can't, I salt to taste. I never worry about it. I never have problems with my blood pressure. The enzymes, it should be listed on the bottle, Crafty, um, and they should be vegan. Most of the stuff I do is vegan and halal. I'm not a vegan, but most of the stuff I do is vegan and halal. I would have to look it up. Um, but it's listed there. I would just look them up and know. I should know that though. I will check that out. So I hope that answers everybody's questions, you guys. It is now what it's wow. So I'm at 18 hours of fasting now. So I'm starting to feel a little hungry. I think I'm going to shut it down now and I'm going to go eat. I will come back at 3. I'm going to go over the reproductive stuff again. You guys, before I drop off, I will talk about it at 3. But when you're insulin resistant and having these reproductive disorders, this same insulin resistance can cause erectile dysfunction in young men. If you have a teenager in your family, and he likely isn't talking to you about that, but if you ever were to find out that was an issue for him, that is a sign that he's already insulin resistant. Get it under control for him now so he can have a normal life. I'll talk to you guys at 3. We'll see you later. Melba, you worry because at 24 your blood pressure was I'm going to answer your question. Your blood pressure was 210 over 156. You were in the hospital for 3 weeks. You've been on blood pressure medication ever since. So I would stay on your blood pressure medication until this is well maintained for you. I feel like I was much the same. It was 180 over 150 every day. There would be nights during the week, at least 2 to 3 nights a week. I would wake up and it would feel like, I'm sure you understand this, like your chest is just going to explode. Your blood pressure is so high, right? And like at that point, the whole everything is running the rails. But I had been to the hospital so many times that I got to a point in life where I was like, I'm not going to wake up 3 nights a week and run to the hospital for them to tell me that what I'm doing is all I can do, or to tell me lose weight. Okay. So I literally would lay in bed at that point and cry because I was 56 at the time. 56. That's still pretty damn young. But I was laying in bed worrying that I was going to die, single grandma. And my kids have their own lives. This is not a bad thing. They have their own lives. I mean, I talk to them more now than ever, but we didn't talk every day. They shouldn't have to talk to their 56-year-old mom every day, but I'm laying in bed with this heart going on and I didn't want to like constantly worry them over it. They were already worried over the amount of pain I was in and that I had a walker and then all this other stuff. Like I did not want to be a burden to my kids, but I laid awake afraid that I was going to die, that my heart was literally going to explode in the middle of the night. And that my kids were going to have to come find me, that my son was going to try and call me because I lived in the same town as him and see where mom was because I have a grandkid and mom isn't answering, and he would wait a day or so and mom still isn't answering, and then they would have to go find me. That's a pretty horrible existence. I don't live like that anymore. I never even have those thoughts. The protocol I use, Melba, has gotten me off of both medications for my blood pressure, all 8 other medications, and I always say 8, but it's actually like 13 because I would use Norco, Hydro, and Gabapentin in order to keep my pain levels under control. But I'm not on any medications now because my blood pressure is normal. So that's a good question. I can't give you a direct answer for that, but I can certainly scour through these guys who talk about insulin resistance and find out if I can understand why your blood pressure is high and your pulse is low. Well, I mean, in some instances that would make sense. Your pulse probably gets high at some points as your blood pressure gets really high, but you're low, high blood pressure, low pulse. Let me see if I can find some answers. And again, I am not a doctor, a nutritionist. I do like to find answers. I will give you the answers I find, and then you can do what you will with them. It's not in any way to diagnose anybody, but it's interesting. I have a curious mind. I'd like to know myself why that's happening and if there's an explanation for it. Because the more I find explanations for these things, it's just crazy what I find and how actually simple it is to fix a number of these things, that we don't have to be suffering like we do. And it doesn't take some big convoluted answer for most of our problems. There are some that require all of these medications and stuff. I understand that. But sometimes it's really just about getting the insulin under control. And then here's the thing, Melba, for me, what I say is, now that I'm on this side of it, right now that I'm on this side and have seen all the things that have gotten better for me, I would encourage people to understand that if you take that elephant that's in the room, that insulin resistance piece, and clear it away, and say you clear that away and your blood pressure comes down, but your pulse is still low, then there's a problem, right? If your blood pressure comes down and your pulse is going up, there's your answer. But if we can remove the insulin resistance piece, which is probably very likely going on with you, and then what happens in my mind, after working in so many medical offices and watching doctors like try to work through stuff, and having a good relationship with some of the doctors that I worked with, and having a curious mind and asking them questions, um, it would be easier for the doctor, if that still is a problem later, uh, to understand if the insulin resistance is removed and all of these other symptoms that are a result of it start to go away as well. Now, for me, what I see is when you remove the insulin resistance piece and you get that insulin more normalized, it becomes a clearer field for them to look, less landmines to step on to find the one that's causing the problem. Does that make sense? So I'll do some looking and see if I can find an answer for you. But otherwise, I'm going to go eat. I will be back at 3. Love you guys. Thanks for hanging out with me today. We'll see you later.